it's like as if this little portal to an alternate universe opened up, and this one song fell out. You're like, oh, wait, come back. this isn't enough. I wasn't expecting us to talk about it on the show, but Brendan mentioned it and said, you know what?
Why wouldn't you think we would talk about that?
Well, we're usually movie TV guys on this show.
It's true.
But there's plenty of movie and TV stuff to talk about with these guys, so I figure we can make it work. Not that we're not going to talk about the music, because you're damn right.
We can work it out. Yes. We can work it out. What spurred this, as Chad is talking about, is that, literally last week or the week before, time is a flat circle. They released what they were calling the final Beatles song. That's an event. I remember when the anthology came out and the idea that there were 2 new Beatles songs, that was a mind blower.
Yeah.
And I know that Chad and I are both Beatles fans. Judging from the display behind Chad, he is a much more financially invested Beatles fan, but at the same time, no, I'm joking.
These are things I've acquired decades ago for the most part.
Yes. I mean, look at the VHS
these are
copies.
More recent, but yeah.
The thing is, we're both Beatles fans going way back. Friendship in general, there's a lot more to it than common interests. But Chad and I, our Venn diagram always kind of includes things like Superman, comics in general, but Superman specifically. And I just remember we would also have long conversations about the Beatles. I remember this. I don't know if you remember this, because Chad and I would occasionally do sort of crossovery things, because he would open for my band doing his solo stuff, but we would sometimes do duet stuff. And of course it's like, let's do some Bowie, let's do some Beatles, and I gotta say our voices blend very nicely. Do you remember driving around just in your car and like trying Beatles songs and like going, well, you do the Paul harmony. Oh no. I loved that. It was always great. It's like, who's gonna take the high part? All right, you try this. And I remember like an entire afternoon of us just harmonizing and doing old Beatles tunes, and that was awesome.
Well, we did play at one of those one of the Zuzu's shows, and you brought me out to sing "I'm Only Sleeping." Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, you and me and Patrick Wyatt. Yeah,
that's right. Oh, fun stuff. Those are the days. So basically, yes, we're both big Beatles fans. I'm sure this meant something to both of us. It certainly meant something to me, and at this point, is it real, like, fan enthusiasm? Yes. But is it also kind of morbid curiosity? Yes. And I don't mean that in any kind of way. It's just that you sit there going, like, these tapes were given to Paul a million years ago. Well, not a million years ago, but Yoko did say, I trust you with these. Here you go. Do what you want with them. John would approve. I approve. That's great. And out of that, we got in my opinion, one great new Beatles song and a decent other one. And so in 2023, you're sitting there going like, well, what was left? Because in order to have John's participation, obviously the songs are going to be John's songs that he had recorded before he left. That's a nice way of putting it. And so you're sitting there going, well, I think they picked the 2 most obvious ones, which was Free as a Bird and Real Love. Yeah. And so what was left? Well, they did some amazing stuff. So we should talk about the song, but we should, of course, also eventually talk about why we love the Beatles so much. Yeah, we're not of that generation. We are the generation after, but I think both of us were probably formed by them from an early age.
They have so much to do, and I guess we're talking about it now.
Do the bio. Let's do the bio.
They have so much to do with my overall philosophy of creativity, because they embody everything about it. And friendship too, because that's the thing that makes them work so well. There's so many layers to these guys.
Yeah.
They're funny. They're just naturally charismatic and funny guys together. They have great chemistry together.
Yes.
You can see in the interviews in the early days that they loved hanging out. They enjoyed the whole experience of being who they were and what they were doing. But they were also incredibly clever and adventurous in a way that I don't think any popular artist had been up to that point. Not that there weren't other adventurous artists. If Frank Zappa was coming around the same time that they were, but he wasn't mainstream. The reason the Beatles always get so much more credit than everybody else is because they made experimental stuff and progressive art commercial, and they prove that you can be adventurous and daring and bold and still sell records. So that's what transformed the industry, is because there was money. People realized there was money in innovation in music. They're the guys who did that, whether they had set out to do that or not. That's what they just naturally gravitated towards, and it's beautiful. And they were bolstered by the fact that they were lucky enough to be discovered by the right people at the right time. There was Brian Epstein, who, he did kind of try to rein them in, to have them behave and present themselves, professionally to a degree. But really, the magic started happening when they met George Martin, because he was sort of a kindred spirit creatively.
Yes.
He realized when he met them that they were kind of diamonds in the rough, but he saw what they were capable of. And that's really just incredible that they met that guy when they did.
I will say everything, amen, brother. But I will also say you try not to, when you borderline worship people or creators or whatever, it's okay, you have to go, yeah, they're people. They did probably some terrible things, and they're human. But what I'm always struck by, it's not just any of those elements. It's the fact that they all came together. That's the thing where you sit there going, that has to be a divine plan. Because every one of those little bits, I have known incredibly talented people in my life who should be known. And it's like, well, I'm sad that it never happened for them. I've known incredibly charming people, funny people that the public would love. I've known people who've had great success in certain fields, whether they deserved it or not, but, stars aligned, it all worked out. That's great. But the combo, just like you're talking about, these four people, and it wasn't all at once. As we know, as you dig into it, it was like a step-by-step thing. I mean, there had to be the sorry Stu, sorry Pete, that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, Starkey, come on over here. We want to play some songs with us. And, it's just every little step was no doubt a challenge, but it was still kismet. It's unbelievable that a Brian Epstein would be in the picture. They couldn't have been the Beatles without him. It's amazing that a George Martin, who that is an unlikely figure to even be involved with a rock band, and yet he is so instrumental. So every step of the way, you're like going, it was meant to be, because they were individually talented and continue to be, the two that are still with us. But it was just, you had to have those four people together. And the world responded. The entire world responded. And I can say the same things about, there's no reason a truck driving teenager from, Mississippi should have become the king of rock and roll. There's all kinds of little things where you sit and go, the people we know of as icons, it almost is tempting to say, well, that was meant to be. This is how legends are made. So I'm lucky that when I was a kid, my dad and mom, who were not really into, your mileage may vary, they weren't really into rock. My dad was a folky, and he, due to his job, also liked some country and western and that kind of stuff. Blues, he loved Ray Charles. But really, as far as rock, not a huge guy. He listened to whatever was on the radio. And my mom was all opera and classical music and Broadway show scores and things like that. So the fact that eventually we come along, me and my brother, and the first LPs I remember us having, besides like a Disney, like a couple of Disney's like sing-along hits, was in Elvis's greatest hits and Meet the Beatles. And it's like Elvis and the Beatles. right there, my introduction to rock and roll. And it just never went away. So I was like, it's almost as if they're like, here are the primers. There you go.
Yeah.
Do with that as you will. And so Beatles were some of my first music. And man, it goes straight to the vein. Love them.
So do you remember, I mean, your parents actually listening to those records at any point? Or was it just you discovered
I think so. I mean, I
think... Did your brother find it first?
No, it was definitely the folks. And then, of course, we liked it. And then Robin... older brothers, for one thing, they get money first because they start doing chores and they start getting allowances, and eventually I did too. But I do remember Robin would probably pester the folks to get more, and we ended up with the entire Beatles catalog, and of course other stuff. It wasn't just Beatles. Robin was really into Barry Manilow. Let's make sure we put this on record so that the entire world knows that my older brother was crazy for Manilow. Anyway, but I'll go ahead and fully admit that as a kid, I had 2 Village People albums. Anyway, so it was the 70s, and I was a child, and I liked the way they all dressed up. Anyway, so the whole thing was, yes, and talking about like me and you singing along and harmonizing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The first real singing I ever did as a kid was me and Robin. And it was also my first... Robin was the one who was like figuring out harmony. And I just would sing melody lines because obviously the songs were so catchy. And I'm like, I remember me and Robin like as kids doing Chains. Chains, my baby's got me locked up in chains. I mean, like literally the early stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I remember me and Robin singing along. And then him hitting me over. And it's a joke. But anyway, so yes, it goes that deep. And it was a continuing thing even from when we were kids. And of course, the movies we would see on TV. Me and you were born while they were still together. And just... pretty amazing that
they were working on Let It Be in Abbey Road.
Yep. And of course I also say, like, I saw the moon landing, I just don't remember it.
Yeah.
I was like 4 months old. I was in my dad's
lap when that happened, as he was
we had a family photo of my mom with me as an infant on her knee and her pointing at this little glowy square, and you can't see any detail, but she's like, you have to trust me, that was the moon landing. It's just the camera wasn't good, but that photo was destroyed in Katrina like everything else. But there was a thing of her going, they're walking on the moon, and I'm going which this was last week anyway. So what about you? Was it your dad just like totally sitting there toking out going like, you're gonna dig this shit, infant Chad? I don't know why funny. I decided that.
I was thinking about this earlier because I figured we would get into this aspect of it. There are 2 things where I think how I discovered the Beatles initially, and it was partially, hugely, this copy of Sgt. Pepper you see behind me, which is my parents'
Oh, that's the original one that you had?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Mono pressing a Pepper. And there's a whole story about that I'll get into in a minute. But yeah, this record was really, I think, I'm a little blurry on this now. I don't know if they actually had a copy of Rubber Soul or if I just remember that being around later. Because I know my stepmother had a copy after my parents got divorced. So I think maybe they had Rubber Soul. I think I've asked my mom. She said, yeah, we had Rubber Soul, but I don't really know if that's true or not. I don't think if they had it, I don't think I would listen to it because I was far more interested in this as a kid. Of course, I was more interested in the colorful, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So that and the cartoons, which I believe came on when we moved to Houston.
I never saw those
in the
until I was an adult.
School.
I never saw the Beatles cartoons until I was an adult.
And that must have been, just the early 70s. They probably stopped being in syndication at some point in the 70s because I never remember seeing them after that. But I remember I would ask, I think I just dug it because of the music and the silliness of the cartoons. Mm-hmm. And that's when my mom started educating me about them and probably pointed me towards this record, saying, by the way, here's one of their records. You can listen to it. So I used to spin this thing. I had a Fisher Price turntable that I would play this and my Star Wars soundtracks on. So it is beat to hell, but it's the funny story with this later, because this really was the only Beatles record I was familiar with up until I was like 12 or 13.
Interesting.
When I was a freshman in high school, that's when I really started expanding my collection through the encouragement of a friend I met that year in French class, whose name is escaping me right now.
It's okay.
Oh, Sean Clark.
Oh,
I never know what happened to him. He was a really cool guy. And he
Sean, if you're listening, let us know.
He pointed me towards this book, Beatles Forever by Nicholas
I remember
Schaffner.
that book. Mm-hmm.
Still one of the best books about the Beatles ever written, even though now we know it's full with a bunch of factual errors, but it's just because, I mean, Nicholas, nobody knew any better at the time. These books, this one too, Shout by Philip Norman.
Shout, I remember. Yep.
Another great book. These are both sort of Lennon-centric and kind of almost a little, because there was a really popular theory at the time that Paul was the one who really ruined the Beatles by being a commanding, overly controlling.
That is one of the narratives. Yeah.
Now we know that's not really. It's more complicated than that, basically, as they get back on shows. But anyway, around the time I was in high school, I was a PVA, I think, and I'd expanded my collection. I'd gotten Magical Mystery Tour. I'd gotten Revolver, the American pressings of Revolver, because still at this point, this is before CDs, so we didn't have the British versions. So these are the American
CD,
pressings with
when
missing.
CDs were created, the first one I got was Pepper. That was the first CD I ever bought.
Oh, actually, I pulled these out. I forgot about this.
We had the red and blue.
Did you have the red and blue? I never got that.
Oh, no, we had the red and blue when we were kids.
This was actually one of my favorites, even though it's not a real album. It's just Hey Jude.
Yeah.
Remember this one?
Yeah, I do.
Really weird selection of singles, but it had the reason I love this so much. It has Rain on it. Mm-hmm. Rain and Old Brown Shoe. So it's just a great collection of songs.
I think pretty early on in their fame, it became like anything they do, we can put out anything they do and it'll sell. We can do the weirdest. It's like a one-off thing. My favorite Beatles song is still, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number.
Yes. Yeah. That was fantastic.
My God.
I think it was when I was 15, when I was in sophomore at PBA, my friend Terry Reynolds asked me to make a double tape of her of Sgt. Pepper. Make a tape for her of Sgt. Pepper, since she didn't have a copy of it and she wanted to listen to it for some reason. So I said, okay, but this was the only copy I had, and it was scratched to hell, and I realized that this isn't going to be a good introduction for her. So I said, I should probably buy a better copy of it anyway. So I took some of my allowance money and went to either Cactus Records or Sound Warehouse and bought a new pressing of it, not having any idea that there was a difference between mono and stereo. This was 1985 by this point, so the mono versions were not in press; they weren't in print anymore.
I don't remember what version we had as kids, honestly.
Yeah. So I listened to it, and the thing that's funny about the Beatles, especially their early records, particularly Sgt. Pepper and some of their later ones too, Revolver as well. I think a White Album, there's some differences too, but there are some really notable differences between the stereo and the mono mixes. And there's actually really, really noticeable differences with Pepper in a couple places. One of them being the animal noises at the end.
I was about to say.
Yeah. And there are other things too, like the laugh that happens. The mono version has this laugh erupt during the reprise when the drums come in. And then I listened to the stereo version, and that wasn't there. And then the animal noises goes on longer, I think, on the stereo version, if I'm remembering correctly. Huh. And I remember listening to it and going, when my musical brain, which wasn't really trained yet, but the memory that I had, I was like, it was like somebody was twisting my brain. I was like, what happened? They changed the album. What happened? So it wasn't until after that I realized what the differences between mono and stereo.
It's true with the Talking Heads stopped making sense too, and possibly all of their catalog. You have a real detail brain. Like, in other words, you have memorized them. I'm sure that I might pick up on that, but I might not, because I've heard both and all, and to me, as long as it sounds like what it sounds like. Though, I mean, the only thing where it really hits home is when you hear things like what is it? Let It Be Naked. Like things where they've literally remixed and changed things around, and you're like going, wow, I just never heard that line before. Like, wow, that bass thing that Paul's doing is unbelievable. And it's just like when the Rick Rubin McCartney 321 little series that came out on Apple, which I really loved, even though I kind of was like, keep going, man, get more into it, get more into the weeds. But the whole idea of him at the mixing board pulling stuff down and going, look at what George is over here, and just like isolating tracks, and you're like going, damn. One of the things that I loved, and I've read those books, and I think you have it behind you. Do you have the complete recordings? Is that the white one there?
No, I do have one of those somewhere.
Oh, I know
this I was going to talk about. This is a really weird guitar.
Oh no,
guitar book my mom bought for me at Harrods in London.
No, because but you know the book I'm talking about, which is the recording book. Which
sorry, that's over here. This is an early version of that. The Mark Lewison book.
You've got the hardcover. Yeah,
this is the original, the first one he put out. He's now rolled this into a bigger collection. I have that over there somewhere on a different bookshelf.
That thing's out of print, by the way. I wish you kept the dust jacket in better shape.
Well, this is because I
Time for some Mylar, Chad.
I inhaled this book, basically.
No, it's the same here, and I'm not even a techie, but being a Beatles fan, being able to go day by day, minute by minute, and know, like, this is where they did the vocal overdubs of blah, 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 and I'm eating it up. Plus, it also has lots of cool little things like, John had stepped out for a sandwich here. It's really like you're there with them, and you realize how hard they worked, even when they were stoned off their gourds. It's like, good Lord, man. They're like spending 10 hours on like one pass on a song. You're like, God.
This is one of you're talking to us about us driving around, harmonizing, listening and stuff. One of the things that was happening around that time, I don't know if you remember this. You remember Sound Waves, which was on Westheimer at the time? It was
yes.
A small but had a very extensive collection of stuff there. That was a great store in its day. And I remember it was one of those places that I could go to where they would always have what I was looking for. Whatever it was that was on my, I want to get a copy of this. Go there, they had it. Like I would go to Cactus sometimes in those days, and they would, oh, sorry, we just sold it out. Like, God damn it. Or Sound Warehouse wouldn't have it. Sound Waves, they always had everything back in those days. But they also had this, notoriously, they had a selection of bootlegs, which they referred to as imports, which were very exorbitantly priced. But this was back when the CD bootlegs of Beatles and other stuff were starting to come out. So there was the series, the Unsurpassed Mastered series, and the Ultra Rare tracks, whatever. So I would, when I'd scrape up enough cash, I would go and buy one of these and just flip out at all the treasures that were on this. And then I would make tapes of it, and we'd be driving around and say, Brendan, you got to hear this.
Yeah.
And I'd be playing all this stuff. And I remember sometimes you're talking about the differences between our musical brains, where we go in different directions sometimes. But you would get caught up in the song and start singing it, and I'm like, no, shut up, listen to this part here. You're like, all right, God, let me get off my case, man.
I'm that way with live stuff too. For me, live albums, and we will return to the Beatles in just a moment, but live albums in general have never done much for me unless they're amazing live things. This is a famous amongst my friends. People don't understand that. They're like, but you love those bands, you love that music, and I'm like, yeah, but the perfect version is the one version. The crafted version is the one that's in my head. If I go see them live, that's a different thing, because I'm there. The experience is different.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm watching them do it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But listening to a not great take on they played Tacoma. It's a show from Tacoma from 1992 or something. And you're like, yeah, but they, it's not as good as the one on the album. And people are like, so all the trading in, like, oh, this is their stuff from the Ratskeller or whatever. It's like, or here's another them backing that. What's that? what's his name, Sheridan or whatever. I'm like,
Tony
My
Sheridan.
Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, and I'm like, these are interesting. They're little things, but yes, I would probably not be paying attention to, like, listen to the change up that he just did. John just did this whole riff, and I'm like going, well, it's the same. It's a song I like. It's just about the song. I want to sing along the song, and I'm not listening to like, I did a thing where I went boo boo instead of boo boo. But that is the difference.
I remember having that live album debate. We had that driving around. So I was like, I see your point, but, and I said, well, I remember saying, what about Stop Making Sense? And he said, yeah, but that's not really a live album. They overdubbed a bunch of stuff. I'm like, all right. I was thinking, okay, listen,
there are some.
This was my thing. I was like, you haven't heard the live version of Abacab off the Three Sides Live. And you said, because we had this debate, like, which is better, the live version of Abacab or you really prefer the studio version, which I understood. I was like, no, look, the live album is an improvement on it. You're like, no way. So we drove around listening to it. I made you listen to the whole thing. And we got to the end, and you're like, I was like, come on.
No, I mean, again, I've heard some amazing live albums, and I will say this: Frampton Comes Alive really is a great live album because the album versions of those songs are not the ones that got played. Because Frampton Comes Alive, those versions are much better. And so all of that stuff, you're like, oh, you listen to the originals and you're like, that's weak. That's weak sauce. The live ones are great. So, I mean, there are plenty of examples of that. But being a Beatles fan, I get it. It's like, how much can I find? How much more? And of course, things like Beatles Anthology, which we'll talk about, and even stuff like Past Masters, Volume 1 and 2, anything that was like, you may have even read about them if you've read the books, like the recording sessions, and been curious. Well, now you're hearing them. It's like, oh, that's great. It's like, I Want to Hold Your Hand in German. Yeah, it's not going to be my favorite version, but I'm still like going, that's great. And now I have it. And you know my name. Look up the number. It's like, I had read about it before I ever actually heard it. And I'm like going, oh, this is the best. So, if you're a fan, and this is true of anything, like, again, with Superman, if I could own every Superman related anything, I would. I mean, if I had that money. So I would totally, because Beatles is something that always, their music, their films, their personalities, as you were pointing out, all that stuff comforts me. It all it's a warm place for me to go. I can be sad about the breakup. I can be sad about, but again, history has proven it, as you said, to not be as harsh as the public made it out to be. On the inside, it was just like friends needing to do their own thing and let's move on. But the breakup, Lennon's murder, George's death, every step along the way, it hasn't taken anything away from what the Beatles did. It's just sad epilogues. And who knows how much longer we'll have with Paul and Ringo with us, but still, it's like, yeah, I could. And in fact, when I knew we were doing this, I rewatched Hard Day's Night and Help.
Oh, cool.
I've got the Criterion of Hard Day's Night, which is so nice. It is so great.
Yeah.
And I've got a decent version of Help, but I hadn't watched it in years. Hard Day's Night I've watched pretty much once a year. Help is not great. I will return to Help occasionally and go, wow, Richard Lester was doing some great stuff. This is a dumb script, boy.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
and
really
slightly problematic. You want to watch the Beatles in a sea of brown face? Here you go.
Yeah.
A bunch of white British actors doing bad Indian accents for comedy. Oh, boy.
Right. And if you just want to see, I mean, it's the thing that makes the movie fun is just knowing that they were stoned out of their gourds the entire time.
The entire time. And you can tell.
Yeah, you definitely.
Also, you can also tell when you watch it how cold they were. Everywhere they went, it was like, why did you guys choose to make a movie in, Britain and the Caribbean, in the Bahamas, in February? Because even the Bahamas, they're like going, it was cold there.
I guess that's the only month they had available.
we're the Beatles. We're freezing our ass off. Anyway, but yes, so I could watch it all the time. I wish I had done Yellow Submarine. Now that I'm looking at Behind Your Head, one thing I did not want to watch was Magical Mystery Tour.
It's not easy to watch. It's not easy to find now, is it? Right?
It's very true. Yeah, I mean, unless Apple.
This copy that I have is definitely not. It's not even. I mean, media. Like what? I don't even know if it's like a bootleg copy of it or what.
That is vintage, my friend. Oh, actually, you can rent it on Apple TV for $3.99.
No way, really?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. I wonder if it's remastered.
I might do that later. No, I actually know I won't because I know it, and it's not good.
It's not good. There are.
Meanwhile, let's see what the wizards are up to.
Yeah. There's really only a couple. I mean, the musical interludes are great. I'm the Walrus.
Well, the music
videos. Best thing about it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I am the Walrus. Great. Yeah, Fool on the Hill.
And there is a scene which is dumb, but I understand what they were going for with it, and it has a certain kind of charm because they were kind of leaning in a more
Chad?
Chaotic.
Chad, you've got a certain kind of charm. Oh.
Cute.
I said it.
Are we in the Burt Bacharach moment? Yeah. You got a certain.
As long as we have a little horn section going. Anyway,
the humor was, which their humor always was kind of Python-esque before Python.
The Goon Show. Because they were huge fans of the Goon Show, and as was Python. So yeah.
So their humor was a mixture of that and like Marx Brothers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of that, and the best moments of Magical Mystery Tour and Help really are when they're just being ridiculously silly.
Yeah.
And in this one, I forget the name of the actor he plays a drill sergeant, and he's like going around barking these nonsensical orders at the people on the bus. So they get off. It's like one of the planned stops on this tour.
Yeah. And he was one of the go-to character dudes.
He was one of their good buddies. I can't remember his name. But anyway, he does that for a while, and then he comes up to Ringo, and Ringo just goes, "Why? Why?" And it's just such a pure Ringo moment for him to have that line. That's one of the moments in the film I do like because it's
Victor Spinetti, the same guy who was in all of their movies.
Yeah,
because he was the TV director in Hard Day's Night.
Yes,
yeah. Very funny. I mean, but yes, it is a thing where musically the world was definitely ready to go with them into their weird psychedelic things. Their timing was perfect. And here's the thing I'll also say. This is not my hot take. It's pretty warm, mildly warm. The Stones, I am proud of them for still being around. I haven't heard the new album, but people are saying it's really good for a bunch of 80-year-olds.
Yeah, I keep hearing that.
And I'm happy for them. And do I like the Rolling Stones? I always have. There's great music there. I'm sorry. The debate isn't even there because and I hate that people keep comparing them and they shouldn't. But here's the thing. The Beatles, like you said, they bridged and no one forced them. It wasn't a commercial thing where someone said, "Hey guys, you know what's coming in is like long hair and doing drugs and singing psychedelic stuff." No, they naturally went away and their talent didn't desert them. It was right there and it was sincere and it was natural. And you tell me another band that they were only together for 10 years. Ish.
Yeah.
But you tell me another band that in that time period changed as drastically and also brought society with them. It's just not even measurable. You can't. And there were plenty of bands that followed the same arc, but there's a crassness and commerciality to it. Like, no offense, Herman's Hermits, you were clearly very popular. I mean, and I'm not pointing at them specifically, but a lot of bands are like, we're kind of in the Beatles mold. Now they're going there. Let's try it. It's like, okay. And you understand the Monkees were completely fabricated anyway. And then they're like, no, we want to do what our friends the Beatles are doing, so let's get trippy. Mm-hmm. And you're like, yeah, but dude, you're singing about dolphins, all right?
Yeah. Yeah, I really don't know if there are. I mean, there are plenty of other artists that we're both fans of that were similarly diverse or eclectic in their career, but I don't really think there's anybody else who was as eclectic as they were from album to album.
Mm-mm.
And enjoying the same degree, and not just the same degree of success, but still exponentially getting more bigger and bigger as they went along.
Yeah.
No matter how crazy they got, because there was just something about them, and because there's later we had bands, there were plenty of bands throughout the 70s who did this, the prog rock bands.
Yes.
They all went. Genesis went on this arc. They became more popular as they got more commercial. That was a completely different thing, really.
Yeah, it's a different arc where they started extremely experimental, then they became commercial.
Yeah,
and Yes did the same thing too. Bowie, yes, but Bowie is
made
always
a whole career out of being a chameleon.
Yes.
But his career would dip and
bouncing in and out of like, I'm way too experimental for what people are doing, and then suddenly a couple of hits and he's commercial, and they're like, oh, finally he's come, and then he'll go off again, and so he is his own thing too.
Yeah. Talking Heads would experiment, but not quite to the same degree of
I will say that they. Again, talk about an amazing band that wasn't together for an incredible amount of time, but still, I would say even their first to their last, because it's primarily, and I'm joining that thing, it's mostly David Byrne. So David Byrne's sensibilities didn't really change. Musically, of course, they were very experimental, but you can listen to the very first thing they did and the very last thing they did and still know it's the same band. I'd say with the Beatles, it's just more extreme.
And it's
like, skiffle band that is suddenly just like out there.
Mm-hmm. I was reminded of that with Now and Then, the new single that came out, because when you listen to it on streaming, it's paired with, poetically, they deliberately put it with a remix of their first single, Love Me Do. And so but I'm not, I haven't actually been able to, I hadn't had the patience to actually listen to this new mix of Love Me Do yet, because I'm just carried away by this new song and this news thing the old song plays. And it is so disparate. It's like, no, not right now. I can't. This doesn't sound anything like what I just listened to. So,
do you want to talk about the new song?
We might as well get in there. Yeah. Did you have any idea that Now and Then was out there before this was announced?
I didn't know it was coming. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it would totally caught me by surprise.
That's why I sent you that demo, because I figured maybe you hadn't heard
I'm glad you did. I remember, I think I was on probably on Apple TV, and the streaming service, and it had a thing called Beatles Now and Then, and I was like, because all I'm thinking is like, oh, is that going to be another like tribute thing or something like we've been getting with the Peter Jackson, amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But so I just looked at it and was like, I ignored it. And then I was like, then there was the new Beatles song. I was like, what? And then realized it had been sitting there the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, I want to hear your take on the song, but also your take on Peter Jackson's video.
Yes. I love it, but it's at once very moving, deliberately, I wouldn't say cloying, but they cut to like the first moment where they cut to right when they say every now and then I miss you, and they cut to the slow motion shot of John and George at Shea Stadium, like okay. But I was tearing up and my heart was swelling throughout the whole thing. And some people have said like it's too silly because
they do the blending of the AICG blending of old them with new them, or new them, current day them. And it is a little goofy. I will say that the moments that work are in other words, I think they could have just done it as a montage of old and them, but then mixing them together, it's a little goofy. And I will say that old Ringo and old Paul, like at the mics, look like they were dropped in like blue screen.
That's the thing that's unfortunate, is that they didn't record or film this video together in the same
I
room,
know.
because Ringo's in Los Angeles, I think, and Paul's in London.
And so you get a lot of like them kind of looking over, and you know that they're looking over at the vending machine.
So I think Peter Jackson realized in order to make this work, he had to put in these other weird elements to kind of liven it up.
Yeah.
Because if it was just the two of them, it would have sucked.
The absolute best thing for me in it was literally the last shot, which is great. Which is the stage shot, which is their setup from Hard Day's Night.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, and it does kind of the color to black and white thing, and you're just like, oh, dude.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's reversed, but still,
I think,
yes, of course, my heart swelled.
Yeah. But that's the thing. People say, oh, it's too silly because it's a serious song and they're doing silly stuff. But I find the silliness to be just as heart tugging as the seriousness of the song, because I miss these guys, you know.
That's the thing.
You see them. That's what I think. That's what Peter Jackson was trying to do, because he is a bona fide, diehard Beatles fan.
Absolutely.
I think he was trying to recapture their silliness, their humor.
The reason why his 9-hour documentary is so important, and not everyone, I guess, had. Even Beatles fans, I've heard some people like, well, I watched the first half and felt great, and that I didn't need to watch all of it. And I'm like, it really does pay off to watch all of it. But the thing is it puts you there. And why it's so important is, as you were pointing out, is that it corrects what Let It Be led us to believe. And I still like Let It Be quite a bit. But Let It Be told a different narrative, and it because they were shrinking it down. And they also didn't set out to shoot the last, you know, Beatles. But they were like, oh my God, we're seeing it all dissolve. And the nice thing about Jackson's giving it all that room is you see that it isn't this huge spat drama. One of the best things is, you know, that their time is numbered, their days are numbered when you're watching that Peter Jackson thing, but they have the exact same chemistry. They're still buddies.
Yeah.
They're still joking with each other. Yes, Yoko's there, and that's weird. But at the same time, when Paul and John are just talking and the hot mic is picking them up, they're just the same teenagers, man. They're just like still riffing on each other. I'm like, yes, more of that all day long. Their friendship is a huge, as you said, huge part of the appeal. They're all charmers. But if they were literally businessmen going in going, I can't bear this look of your face or whatever, it's like just talk to my manager or whatever. No, these guys were in sync, and watching them riff on stuff and just like noodle, you're like, oh.
And I think that's why Now and Then has such huge emotional weight. The part of the value of seeing the videos, but you do have, it's not just the silly archival footage they throw in there. It's the actual footage of them making the song.
Yes,
we do see what we never saw before, as John, Paul, and Ringo working on it back in 1995, which is cool. There's just a little bit you can.
Not John.
Much footage, obviously.
You mean George?
Yeah, George, Paul, and Ringo. Sorry.
Yeah.
Working on it back in 1995, which obviously must not have been very much footage, because there's not much in the video, because they didn't.
Well, but because they were like, I'm sure that Jeff Lynne was like, guys, it's not going to work as well as the other two.
It may have just been like one day that they worked on it. So let's go
but
back to
still,
Real
you
Love
hear George's guitar, what he did back then. It's on there, and it's like, oh, that's great.
And they don't. I'm hoping somebody at some point is going to do a breakdown and tell us exactly what's what.
I would like,
because I think I know where George's guitar is on there, and there is this guitar. It's kind of a different rhythm guitar that comes in like the second and third verse, which is very similar to one of the parts you hear in "Free as a Bird" of Horror. Not exactly the same, but it's kind of a similar kind of syncopated rhythm that's different from the backbeat that he's doing. I have a feeling that's probably what George was playing. And then there's the down down digga down down, which is sort of like a Let It Be thing riff that he does going into the chorus. But when you see that footage of Paul, you know, overseeing the score recording, you know, Giles Martin's and his score that they did for it, and you see him just
Giles Martin, that guy continues to impress too.
Yeah, this song was. That's the thing the video really drives home for me, is how important this song was for Paul to finish. That this was his old partner. You know, he never really had another creative partner the way that he and John worked together. And he didn't even really try ever to replace John. And
No, I
even when
mean,
he worked with
anyone he
Elvis
worked
Costello, it
with,
was
they
a little
would,
bit uncomfortable for him.
yeah, a little
You know?
uncomfortable. I think that he collaborated with everyone he worked with.
Sure.
I think that you always hear about, how Wings worked. It wasn't just the Paul McCartney show, because he is a musician that likes a band, and then it's
Yes.
like, oh, that's great. That's great what you did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it wasn't like, just do what I tell you. All right. You have signed
Right.
up. You're now part of the McCartney machine. No.
No.
So a lot of the great tracks that he created post Beatles still have lots of musicians and collaborators' fingerprints on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love the Elvis Costello collaboration. I
Oh
mean,
my
I
God.
think that was,
Yeah.
if nothing else, it was challenging for Paul, which is good because he
Mm-hmm.
probably hadn't been challenged in so long.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, oh, I have to meet this other talent. And
Yeah.
this is a very different personality
Well, and I
than
think this is why that Now and Then was a challenge that he really wanted to tackle. Number one, well, because hugely, obviously, because it's John, and he
Yeah.
knew this was as they're billing this maybe. Oh, Peter Jackson has a different theory about this, which we'll touch on in a minute.
Oh,
Peter Jackson. This was essentially going to be the last time that all four of them could be on one recording together that they had actually all actively participated in at some point. In a way, this was an opportunity for Paul to be challenged and to,
yeah.
if you listen to that demo, which I'd sent it to you yesterday,
Yeah.
and you listen to that original demo, you really very quickly realize how much work Paul put into making this song actually as good as it is.
Yes.
The demo isn't crap, but it is very different from the finished product. And it's also, that's the thing, it's very unfinished.
Yeah,
it is a
voice. Yeah, it's a voice and piano, and while I do agree that the part that they paced over, that little bridge, they made the right choice. Mainly because you can tell lyrically, I think John knew that was like a placeholder. It doesn't go anywhere.
He didn't. Yeah.
The core of it is literally the verse sections, which is where the title comes from. The thing with that song that I'm really loving, both versions, including the demo, yes, you can tell it's definitely a John Lennon, composition. But even for John, these are, and I'm not Mr. Can't read music. I don't talk music construction, but these chords, the whole thing, it's like, weirdly, for John Lennon back in 1977, it already has an instinctively looking back, morose, it's a sad chord thing, but very beautiful. And it just doesn't sound like choices he is making at that time, because I'm familiar with John's work from the end of his life and all of his solo stuff. And you sit, even for John, you're like, oh, that's an interesting composition that John came up with, because it doesn't sound like what he was doing at that time. And I love it because it is atypical, and yet it's totally him. And you go, right. So, I mean, obviously, I think that's why the lyrics were like, but now and then. The whole thing is I think he was like, yeah, this music sounds like it is someone saying like, oh, I'm looking back on things we had and I'm appreciating it, and da da da. It is really almost saccharine. It's almost a Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
It's John doing a Paul song, which is why this kind of sounds like a perfect thing for them to have collaborated on, even though Paul wasn't collaborating with him in 1977.
Right. And I because this song had to grow on me. When I first heard it, I was coming back from Ireland. I was on the plane, and my ears were all stuffed up because I came home with a sinus with congestion. So when the plane from Dublin was landing,
Ireland will do that to you.
Newark,
Ireland will do that to you.
When we're coming down, I don't know if you ever had this when you're in a plane, when the plane's descending, and if you're already congested, your ears seize up, you can't hear jack shit.
Do you do that?
So.
And pop your ears on purpose?
I tried. That didn't work in this case. Oh. But anyway, so that's when the song was made available that day, and I couldn't stream it on the plane. So I tried to listen to it during the layover in Newark, and I could barely. hear it like, and I listened to it. My ears opened up again on the flight to Houston from New York, and that's when I was able to. I downloaded it and I was able to listen to it on the plane a bunch of times. And then, of course, my ears seized up again. It took days for my ears to go back to normal. So it wasn't until like a day or two ago that I was actually able to listen to the song in full stereo again.
Yeah,
because this one ear was all stuffed up. But anyway, when I first heard it initially, I was like, I dug it because there's that documentary where they show you how they isolated John's voice using Peter Jackson's machine learning technology, the same one he used in Get Back. And that was the first time I'd heard that, and I was. It was like my heart stopped.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Amazing. But my nitpicky brain which was familiar with from the demo from years ago, because I got that on bootleg like 30 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, it had been in circulation for a long time, and so I was like, well, they didn't put that in, and why did they take the "I Don't Want to Lose You" part out, and what? Oh, this guitar solo, I know. It was supposed to sound like George, but it really doesn't. I was like really picking it apart way too much. I was being a little too analytical. And, but the more time I had to listen to it, and especially after seeing the video, I've heard a lot of people say this, that the video kind of helped the people kind of connect with it.
Yeah.
Because you get to see the faces of the people who made it. I think that has something to do with it. And you really get to see Paul's investment in the song in that video. Yeah. That's really why that video is so valuable, I think. And then it really started growing me, and I realized, the parts that they took out made the song better. And this was an example of Paul sort of collaborating with John.
Yeah.
Through time.
He still has...
It's beautiful in a way.
He still has the same... Because that's how they collaborated. Really, there was almost always one of them had the song. The other guy made it better. In both ways. Yeah. It was almost like, it'd be better is, what if you did, that kind of thing where they're like able to, without tearing the other person down, say, oh, I love that, but what if it did this instead? And that is beautiful. It wasn't literally, I don't think ever, them literally sitting there going, what, across from each other, maybe when they were like really first starting out. But the idea that they were 50-50 on a song, I just don't think so. One of them came in and was like, oh, I was tinkering around. This is called scrambled eggs. Okay, great, whatever. So the idea that, yes, decades later, Paul was able to come in and go, oh, because he's a brilliant songwriter too. He's like, that's a little weak. What would make it better is if it went here.
That's what I really love is that brilliant mind needs, like you're saying, it needs the challenge. And I think, and I it's not fair because I haven't really listened to a lot of his recent solo records. I know I have some of it. I know some of it is really cool. If he's got some weird and slightly, off the beaten track
the
kind of stuff on there.
Stuff.
Yeah. But when he's faced with that challenge, and I think that's what John did, is John challenged him. And that's the thing about the song that's just it just gets me, man.
Here's the thing, and I love both of their solo output, just like I love George's solo output, but they were always better together. I think that Paul McCartney, one of the greatest tunesmiths in history, like just with an unbelievable natural ideas for hooks and just an amazing pop songwriter. And most of the solo stuff I'm always like, but lyrically a lot of it is goofy. Because that's where his brain goes. And I think he's always been very like, oh, that's a clever bit. He likes a cute pun. He likes funny little things. I think he needed a John always to come in and say, that's a little pat. That's a little cheesy. What if you did this? And that's the sad thing, is that I can sit there and listen to McCartney all day, but I'm like, oh, that's goofy, man. Which is why a Costello, who's an amazing wordsmith, that was probably some of the best stuff that McCartney did in the later years, or
in the 80s, late 80s.
Yeah, because it's like, wow, there's actual weight instead of all of it being feather light. And you're like, oh, I like when a little darkness comes in. And it is pat to say John brought the dark and the edge, but he did. Sorry, everybody. He did, because that's the way his brain worked.
Right.
Yeah, no. So the song I really like I told you in the text, for me, the only bad thing about this thing is that it came in 2023 when, and I love Paul, but the voice is pretty much gone.
And I think, well, it's not gone. He's just not what he used to be.
No, yeah, that's true. The age is in it. So it
Yeah,
wobbles
right.
and it's very frail. And you're like, oh, I mean, he's hitting all the notes, but so they've mixed him very low in it.
Right. And I think that some people have said that maybe that's one of the reasons why. Because that was one of the things I was disappointed when I first heard it. I was like, I was expecting, because I knew how unfinished the song was.
Yeah.
Well, I was expecting something like "Free as a Bird," where he went and he and George both
actually
filled the empty spaces by singing.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought for sure that's what he would do with it. I don't want to lose you. I thought Paul would come in and finish that.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me that maybe either he couldn't sing it or lyric. There's a bunch of different reasons, but this song really just works so well.
Even their ahs, I was like, oh yeah, the ahs were sampled.
They took that from Abbey Road or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is, I kind of give that. It is a little weird, but I give that a pass because that's something that Giles Martin had been doing with love and stuff. So they kind of blended a few of those things together to make this happen. But that was the thing. Is like, well, I really hope that Paul would put more of himself into this one. But I think it's more than the fact that his voice doesn't sound the same anymore. I think that it was really important to him to lift John up, and this last chance that he had to do this.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's almost like it's Paul McCartney producing a John Lennon solo record.
Yeah.
And that, again, beautiful. It's a beautiful idea. I love that idea. That's what we have.
Yes, and hats off to technology, which will destroy us all someday. But at the same time, the ability to take, you listen to that demo, and I'm really glad you sent me that link. It is stark. It's beautiful because John sitting at a piano, which I know is how all these things came around, the later Beatles songs. It's fine on its own, but it's a demo and recorded on old cassettes.
Mm-hmm.
So you listen to the original and you're like, holy hell, because what they were able to do with the technology, because Jeff Lynne did a really good job back in the 90s with what he had. But you can tell it's like, well, let's put some effects on this because we can't hide tape hiss or whatever it is. And so John's voice sounds really processed and weird. At the same time, I think "Free as a Bird" is still the best of. I mean, it's the reason they launched that one first is because that's the one.
It's a great song. Yeah,
it's a great song, and that video is still unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say earlier. You can't, as fun as that Now and Then video is, you can't beat the "Free as a Bird."
You can't beat the "Free as a Bird" video. That was,
my God. It's just such a brilliant piece of work. Yeah.
Oh God.
Like you're drifting through a dreamscape.
Where it's just Easter eggs, but without being it's all very on the nose, but at the same time, there's stuff in there you could still discover years later and go, oh, I never caught that.
It's on the nose. Yeah, it's on the nose, but it's not really shoved in your face because it's presented as this like a collage, like a dreamlike collage, like you're drifting through somebody's imagination.
And the sweeping camera through it all, being the bird and all that, and then just ending up on the stage with the little ukulele, the tick 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 tick, and they're like, so good. Anyway,
I hope, and I'm pretty sure they've probably already done it, but they're probably sitting on it as Apple tends to do with this stuff. That they probably have already gone back and done the same. Get back Peter Jackson treatment to John's vocals on those on Real Love.
Do you think?
Free as a Bird. I guarantee you they have.
You don't think that they just put a stamp and said done?
No, but I think now that they have that technology, they could go back. They've already actually in 2015 they did put out remixes of both of those songs. On the new
technology's gotten better. Yeah.
So they're going to do it again. And I think people have been talking about because every yearly they've been coming out with these new refurbished versions of things.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk that they're going to do a new expanded version of the anthology. And that's probably when they're going to re-release those other two songs. And hopefully, I would hope at that point they put out a different mix. I would like to hear a remix of Now and Then that accentuates the string arrangement more because I want to hear those strings more. That's really good.
He's put that out there. That's Chad's wish. No, I'm down for that. And again, anthology, when that first came out, I was like, they can't ever top that. But maybe they just keep making it better. I loved it, even though it was just literally all the modern day stuff with them sitting on a lawn with ukuleles. I'm like, ukuleles. And it was just like, George is really into ukulele right now. Okay. But I loved every second of it. And this, like you said, we'll never have a perfect final Beatles anything. But I really like the song, and John sounds fucking amazing. But it was
Sounds
1977
great.
John, of course, and
yeah.
So and the way they cleaned it up, it sounds like it was recorded yesterday. Yeah. So
here's something that Peter Jackson said I was alluding to earlier.
Oh yeah,
he was interviewed somewhere, I forget where. It's a very recent interview where he goes off just being the nerd. He can't help himself. He said, well, really, because maybe he had been asked about, is this really the last Beatles song? He says, well, I mean, technically we could do more because he knows technically he is so familiar with the expansive.
Right.
He was referring to all the stuff that he reviewed for the Get Back film. There's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of material there, and he knows that there are unfinished songs that could be worked up and finished, so he knows that. But he said, well, I haven't talked to Paul or Ring about this, but technically it's possible. So I
mean, in a possibly nightmare scenario, which might still be there. That's why I say morbidly curious and morbidly fascinating is that they could, at this point, they could have Paul say, I would have sung something along the lines of this. And then they could go back and they can program young Paul voice.
Sure.
Just like they're doing with the Star Wars stuff where it's like, yeah, James Earl Jones hasn't said anything as Darth Vader in years. They just have his voice and they can plug in whatever they want. So it could be Paul saying like, this was what my vocal line would be. And they're like, great. Now let's have 28-year-old Paul McCartney vocals do what he says he would be singing.
Yeah.
And we probably wouldn't even be able to tell.
Well, and whether we want that or not, people are going to be doing that. And that's the thing. It's a little scary, but it's also like, okay, we just kind of have to learn how to deal with it. If it's in service of
old material. In other words, if it's like you're saying where they did something is just like they were noodling, but there's the basis of a song there, and they can clean stuff up and make it studio clean. We might have a new Beatles song that was really something that they did, just technically tinkered with. But it's when they start saying, we're going to write a new Beatles song and the Beatles are gone, but we have their voices and we can emulate their musicianship.
Yeah, it makes me uncomfortable, but I know people have already done it. So you can find these things on YouTube. Yeah, they're not very good, but people are already taking a crack at this.
Oh,
yeah, I know. But that was the thing about the song that it's like I want more. It's like as if this little portal to an alternate universe opened up
where they
John
kept going.
Didn't die. Yeah, and then this one song fell out. You're like, oh, wait, come back. This isn't enough. Give me more.
I see it all as, I mean, every step along the way as a fan, every step along the way, whether it's a new documentary or old tracks or whatever it is, I see them as gifts. It's like, thank you. None of it will compare with the canonical stuff. Those original albums, those original songs, the singles, that is the stuff. Everything else, icing on the cake, but the cake itself is never going to go away. So I'm glad I grew up a Beatles fan. They're just the best, yo. I mean, they're no Village People, but YMCA. As far as I know, they never spelled anything out except for in Semaphore. They did spell out help. I also love that you have the Ruddles along with it too.
Yeah.
I have always thought in the back of my mind, cheese and onions.
Yeah. Sadly, that's another guy that we lost.
I know.
In recent years, Neil Innes. People don't. I've often tried to hit people to this, that it's not just a parody the music, the songs are actually really good.
There are a few instances where people who did parody were so good and also really good songwriters that it's as good ish. And so I love the Ruddles. It is really great alternate Beatles stuff, all wacky. And I say one of my favorite comedies, which was still underrated to this day, is Walk Hard. And Walk Hard's soundtrack, those songs are all kickers, man. They're all great. And they're parodying multiple genres of music, and they just nail it. And I'm just sitting there going, I can listen to this all day long. These are good songs. They're hilarious, but they're good. So yes, it takes a special talent to be able to say, yeah, I'm just going to do a riff on it, and it turns out to be also really good.
Yeah.
There, you can listen to any, obviously the original Ruddles, not so much the ones that came later, but they were still pretty good. But you just sit there going like, you know exactly what era they're mocking. And of course, Spinal Tap. Spinal Tap is another thing where it's like they nailed everything so hard that the songs themselves are classics. But you sit there going like, oh yeah, that's them doing their early blues influence stuff. This is them mocking the psychedelic stuff. Here's they're doing their Baby You Can Drive My Car. It's just all good. All good.
Yeah. What else is there to say?
What else is there to say other than thanks for watching us just gush and reminisce about the Beatles for 2 hours. Well, not 2 hours.
Well, yeah.
But we are obviously fans. Hopefully you are too. If not, I don't know what to tell you.
Right. I'm surprised you lasted this long if that's the case.
Go watch something about the Barbie movie. I don't know what all that means. Which I enjoyed as well. And also has some really good songs on the soundtrack.
Are there any movies worth going to see right now?
Marvel's
about to come out, right?
I did finally see Killers of the Flower Moon, which I'm sure it's in its last week or two. It was amazing. Okay. All 3.5 hours of it. Brilliant. Loved it. Yeah. And Scorsese talking about, an elder person still at the top of their game. That guy can make a movie. He's going places, that Martin Scorsese. Yes, this week The Marvels comes out. I'm going to go see it on Thursday. I'm excited. All this crap about, is this the death of Marvel? Marvel keeps going down. They don't know what they're doing anymore. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there going, I've enjoyed everything they've done. in varying degrees. I mean, yes, I can pick out the really high watermarks, but I don't think they've done anything that was shit or crap. It's like season 2 of Loki. I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Oh God, that is I think that show is head and shoulders above pretty much almost everything they've done in the past couple of years.
It's so good.
I think like Spider-Man or No Way Home. That was my last really just excellent Marvel movie. This is like in a class of its own. And Loki is like it's its own thing almost.
Loki is amazing stuff, and it's people who are sleeping on it. I get it. People are tired of, do I have to see everything to make sense out of it? And now Marvel's like, okay, we're going to stop doing that. You're going to be able to watch Echo without having seen Hawkeye. It's like Echo's coming up. It looks pretty brutal. Have you seen the trailer for Echo?
Yeah. Just yesterday, I think.
Woo!
But it's pretty clear now from the reports coming out that, and this has been reported multiple times from multiple sources, that Marvel this was something that happened during the pandemic at the directive of Bob Chapek, who is now gone from Disney. Mm-hmm. He was of the mind that we just more content. Everybody just make as much shit as you possibly can, and just this torrent of content. So Marvel was under all this pressure to produce way more than they were really capable of putting out while maintaining quality control.
Yeah,
and then the pandemic, and then dealing with the pandemic at the same time. It was just I think that's probably the main reason why things seem to be going off the rails the last couple of years. But
I really don't understand.
Like it seems to me that they're regaining control now.
Well, a lot of the critical stuff that's coming out now, I think it was a Variety article. I bet you guys didn't expect to get some Marvel at the end of your Beatles.
I wasn't sure we were going to get to this either. Yeah.
No, I mean, we can make this short because it actually deserves perhaps more chatty chat. Sure. But I'll say this. a lot of the critical things is basically saying they've lost their tentpole characters, and therefore people just aren't as invested. They're like going, sure, they gave very well thought out arcs to Iron Man, Captain America, Thor is still out there, but they're basically like, they wrapped him up. And then like going, now Marvel's expecting you to care about Ant-Man. Now they're expecting you to care about, Loki and Captain Marvel and all these other characters, Shang-Chi. And I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, again, for me, you don't need the marquee names because they have had their time, and Marvel has such a deep catalog of amazing characters that, to me, as long as the stories are good, I will go see a million Shang-Chi movies if they wanted to make them. Do Ghost Rider again. Can't wait. They've got Blade coming up. Yes. Because to me, these are all deserving, of a TV show or a movie or whatever it is. But I do agree that pacing them out, taking their time, giving us something really amazing. Yeah, so that's fine with me.
What did you think about this? Was pretty amazing. I guess they had filmed half the season of Daredevil this new season, and they just said nope, threw it all out, and they're starting over from ground zero.
I just don't know. I
have to say, I'm hoping that means I'm hoping that is good news that they did that, because I have to be honest, I was very worried after seeing the way that Kingpin was portrayed in the Hawkeye show. I was like, this is not the same character. And Daredevil and She-Hulk was good, but it was like they were going for high camp in that show. So it was like, I'm not really sure what's going on. Of course, I loved his brief appearance in No Way Home. I thought was perfect.
Yes.
So that was nice.
Yes.
But my worry was, okay, they don't have any of the original showrunners from Netflix, and if they're really, that show was an amazing achievement. And if they're going to continue with the same cast, or well, some of the same, the two main people from the cast, and you're not even, you're not recasting Daredevil you're not really rebooting the character or anything, and you've got to at least try to continue that degree of quality.
Well, there was
I'm hoping that's why they ditched this. Like, oh, this is not.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm putting a pin in this. We need to do a whole show, and I can't go on. No, that just means I'm getting really excited about it, and also I'm pulling from my own brain like what I've read and little things. I'm like going, no, that's another hour. So
yeah,
we will. Hey, tune in. We need to get to the bottom of that and get back into talking about all kinds of rumors about the DC stuff. They keep dropping trailers for Aquaman, and you're like, I feel bad for it. Have you seen Blue Beetle yet? Have you still not?
No, I assume it's on streaming now.
Yeah, it is. You should check it out.
When I saw Barbie, I was intending to see Blue Beetle, but I hit the wrong movie.
It was like just a B name.
Yeah. So really, sorry.
You went and you're like, why is this Barbarella? Yeah. That movie came out in 1968. Why am I watching Jane Fonda naked? Hello? You're all alone in a theater.
Yeah.
I was like, you hit the button, man. I love the idea of a projectionist going, I don't know, we sold a seat. Let me dig. There it is. Playing Barbarella. One guy. We'll talk about that kind of stuff next week. I'm glad you're back from Ireland. I'm sure our fans, all 500 and however many there are happy that you're back and we're chatting again.
Yeah, and we're chatting. I am way behind again on everything. I'm about to work on a Halloween episode the week after Halloween.
Oh, did that not come out?
That was a mistake. I shouldn't have done the Halloween, or I shouldn't have steered us in that direction.
No, that's okay. So, it'll delight people. They'll be like, Halloween. Yeah.
You'll be celebrating that for Thanksgiving.
It's further proof that we're retro. It's because we're even retro about like a month before. Anyway, so I'll see you next week, Mr. Man. Take care.
Sounds good. All right, and thank you all. Oh, and please join us on Patreon. You'll get to see these episodes long before anybody else does.
Yeah, I still haven't seen the Brazil episode.
Yeah. That is going to come out this year, by the way. I was thinking probably since it is a Christmassy thing, maybe I'll put it out, after maybe on Black Friday or something like that. I don't know, just to get us into that spirit.
Love it.
So,
okay.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys.